Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to check out another of these brand new 2022 Collecta figures, and this one is a very cool looking version of a Pteranodon Sternbergi. This is very exciting because we actually had a Pteranodon last year, but that was a different species. This year we have the Sternbergi version, and I really do quite like the Sternbergi version. I think the crest on the pterosaur looks really cool, really unique. Definitely stands out as far as a Pteranodon goes. We have it in a standing position like we've had quite a few times now from Collecta. They seem to be enjoying the standing position for their pterosaurs, and I can completely understand why, as that's a great way to display the pterosaur when they're not in a standing position. It at times can make it a little difficult to actually find a good way to display the pterosaur, so standing positions, unless you have some sort of like a peg or rod or something to hold it up, usually work the best as far as display options go. Now this figure, when it was initially unveiled on us, actually I was a little deceived, but I wasn't deceived by Collecta or Everything Dinosaur or anyone like that. I deceived myself because looking straight at the figure, I instantly assumed that it was going to be another of those like mega deluxe versions from Collecta, those really large versions of the pterosaurs that they release, and this actually is not. This is a much smaller, much more kind of standard size ranged version of a Pteranodon Sternbergi in comparison to, the much larger versions. And just, for a comparison right now, even though we usually don't do comparisons so soon, but if we actually pick the pterosaur up and we bring it over here, there is the Pteranodon from last year, the very large version that we had, and here is the Sternbergi version from this year. And if we actually put the two together, you could see that there is a very large difference between the two. So straight away, again, you can definitely see that this is a much smaller version. Even right here in comparison to my hand, you can see that this Pteranodon is a much smaller version of a Pteranodon than what we've previously had, but that does not mean that the figure is not absolutely awesome. So let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at it right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of our Pteranodon, you can see that it has a very flashy appearance to it. I really like the maroonish tones of color they've given the beak running up into the crest. I think that was a really cool idea on the part of Collecta, something that I could definitely see being the coloration of the beak of this pterosaur, and also something that I feel like really helps the pterosaur to stand out. Of course, the coloration up here further back into the crest helps as well, but that maroonish color is definitely very appealing. You can see that we have the nostrils sculpted out quite nicely here on the beak, and the actual detailing of the beak itself is incredibly nice looking. Very nice cracks and crevices and all of the exact type of detail you would expect to find throughout the course of a pterosaur's beak. It's all very nicely present here throughout the course of this Collecta version. The jaw is articulated. The only downside to the figure I think that I can honestly pick out is if you look inside the mouth, the tongue does not have any type of alternate coloration other than the coloration that we have for the beak. So the tongue wasn't like painted separately, which honestly isn't a huge deal, especially since the coloration of the beak is pretty close to like the type of coloration you would expect to see on the inside of the mouth of the pterosaurs. So at the same time it works, but it just would have been nice to see some slightly different coloration there on the tongue. It would have made a little bit of an improvement, but it's not something that I feel like was absolutely necessary. So it looks okay that way, and the tongue is definitely nicely sculpted, but I feel like maybe like a light pink or something just to differentiate the tongue a little bit would have helped a little bit more so than just leaving it that same type of like a maroonish type of a dark pink type color that we have there. And the more I'm actually looking at it, the more I think it's more so of like a really dark pink rather than a maroon. Kind of has like a maroon tint to it in certain lights, but when it's actually up here in the light now, I see it looks more like a dark pink. But we also have some black stripes that kind of run along the beak before we get toward the tip of the beak, and it transitions entirely to a black tip, which looks very nice. The eye is also very nicely sculpted. You can see it's painted with a black. It has a pink ring around it, and then we have a white ring around that. So there's some really nice coloration there in the eye area of the pterosaur. I really do quite like that. The eye has a nice gloss coat as well, so it shines very realistically. And the pycnofiber look to the face looks really good. You can see some very thick-looking pycnofibers that pick up there right past the eye socket area. Moving up into the crest of the pterosaur, you can see some more really nice skin texture. Very fine looking skin texture, I would say. You can also see again that that pink coloration runs up here over the front of the crest. We also have some black streaks, and then we pick up on some yellow as the crest very nice and gradually transitions to an orangish tone of color. And then we have some more of the black, some more yellow, and some more black. So we have some nice designing out onto the crest. And the coloration of the crest being a nice mixture of pinks, yellows, blacks, and oranges really stands out, really creates an extremely flashy appearance for the pterosaur, and I really do quite like the color. Pretty much every area of this figure is very, very nicely colored. As you move down the course of the pterosaur, we see the coloration change from black to white here in the neck. It's not a gradual transition, it's a very abrupt transition, but it looks really good. You can also see that there's like some light tan coloration here in like that saggy skin there of the throat of the pterosaur, and that transitions nice and smoothly back to the white, but the detailing there is really nicely done. You can also see like a lot of wrinkling and everything going on as far as the skin in that vicinity, almost giving the pterosaur like a slight pelican type of a look, I would say. And then if you take a look here in the back of the neck, the wings are kind of in the way, but you can see more of the really nice detailing as far as like the pycnofibers and everything go. And as quickly as we transitioned to that white, we transitioned back out of that white to a gray, and then the gray kind of overtakes the majority of the body. You can see the spinal column running along the back of the pterosaur right there. You can also see again more really nice detailing throughout the course of the figure. You can see the muscle definition as well as the shoulder blade nicely right there. As you move down the course of the arm moving out into the wing, you can see another splotch of the white right there in the wing area, just to add a little extra color variation. And then we transition back to that same tone of pink that we actually have on the beak for the arm, and I think that as well looks really nice. You can see the skin detail there within the skin flap of the wing looks really nice. We have some nice grayish tones in there as well, but we have a lot of creasing and everything going on. As you move down there, you can see the hand. The hand is pretty nicely sculpted. It doesn't sport an incredible amount of detail, but it looks pretty good. And we also have, again, some nails painted with a gray. And then as we move back up here into the wing, you continue to see, again, that pinkish tone of color. As we transition toward the tip of the wing, we have a nice black tip for the pterosaur just to highlight the wings a little bit. I always like that look for pterosaurs where the wings darken toward the tip. You'll probably always see that when I paint pterosaurs. I just really like that look. And if we move back here past that wing tip to kind of get an idea of what the texturing and everything looks like in the skin flap of the wing, you can again see more really nice creasing and stretching of the skin. It looks very nicely done. The entire body also continues to look really good. We have a nice tail on the back of our pterosaur that transitions to a black there for the tip of the tail, and you also have some very nicely sculpted out legs that again transition back to that very dark pinkish color. We have again gray nails for the pterosaur as well as some nicely detailed feet. The toes are sculpted out pretty nicely, and you're not really going to see too much difference honestly over here as far as the body goes, because the pterosaur is standing in pretty much the same position on both sides, I would say. The legs are stretched very nicely. You can see the skin stretching as far as the skin flap of the wing and everything over here, just like we had seen on the previous side. The very nice pycnofiber type look throughout the course of the figure looks really good. It almost doesn't even look like pycnofibers. It looks almost more like full-blown feathers throughout the course of the pterosaur, and you can again see that the paintwork is really precise as far as exactly what we had just seen on the initial side. Again, those black tips look really good. The only real big difference I think that you're going to see over here that is different than the initial side is the fact that the pterosaur has its head turned very sharply to its left, and you can see that here on this side. So the head is just facing away from us a lot more so on this side, obviously making the opposing side the more dominant display side, but it looks pretty good either way. Again, from this side, you can see the turn in the neck is pretty nicely displayed, but considering we have those pycnofibers and everything all over the place, you can't really see too much as far as like skin movement or anything. We also have that white coloration that runs the underside of the pterosaur, but then that as well transitions away to the grayish tone of color that we have for the majority of the figure. And you can also see the undersides of the skin flaps of the wing look really good, and we also have the information on Collecta and of course the species and all of that. But a beautiful looking pterosaur, honestly. Collecta did a great job, not only on the sculpt, but also picking out a really cool flashy paint scheme for this one. So I really love this Pteranodon Sternbergi, just like I loved the Pteranodon from last year. As far as a size goes, and again, keep in mind that it is much smaller than your average pterosaur from Collecta, and at this point, the average pterosaur seems to be those larger, like, I forget exactly if they're mega deluxe or what exactly they call them, but they're the usual pterosaurs nowadays from Collecta's. We usually get those very large versions, so this one is again a bit smaller. For length from the beak to the tip of the tail, you're looking at about, I would say about 5 3/4 inches, or closing in on 15 centimeters. And then for a height, if I can sneak in here amongst that wing, you are looking at just shy of 5.5 inches, or about 14 centimeters actually, to the top of that crest. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line in comparison to our Collecta Pteranodon Sternbergi, and you can definitely see that as far as the figure goes, even though it is smaller when it comes to a Collecta pterosaur, it still sports a pretty impressive size as a pterosaur in general. It's not often you get a Pteranodon from any company as large as you see this one here. Of course, the larger deluxe versions from Collecta that they often release are just massive, but even by regular Pteranodon figure standards go, this one still sports a pretty good size. And then as far as another comparison goes, here is the older Pteranodon, which is not going to fit in a way that I can really nicely display the size, I think, of the two. So actually, let me pull the camera back here a little bit, and then we'll put the two face to face. So there's the older Pteranodon, if it's one that you happen to have from Collecta, a very, very old Pteranodon. So obviously just showing you the difference between what Collecta used to produce compared to what they produce now. You can see the evolution of Collecta right here, just like you saw in the Paraceratherium review, but you could definitely see that again, as far as a size goes, the older one was a good bit larger as far as like the overall body mass, but of course the wings were out and displayed in an open position, so you're going to see a pretty significant size difference. If this pterosaur were spreading its wings, the size probably would not be too far off between the two. But as far as another comparison goes, here is the Collecta Ornithocheirus, and we'll have to put this one back a little bit because the Ornithocheirus tends to like to fall over on me. But you can see again that as far as a size goes, the Pteranodon here is definitely a pretty good size, especially in comparison to an Ornithocheirus here. But the figure itself, again, is kind of like, I would say, close to a larger or similar to like what you would expect for a standard-sized pterosaur with the Ornithocheirus. So you could see that the newer Pteranodon Sternbergi still remains pretty decently sized. And then here is the Quetzalcoatlus that they have released in comparison to the Pteranodon Sternbergi. Again, hopefully helping to give you an idea roughly of the size. A lot of these really large pterosaurs aren't showing off their size in comparison to this Pteranodon Sternbergi, as there's a very, very large size difference between the Pteranodon and the previous two pterosaurs in real life. But as far as Collecta figures go, you can see that they're not too far off as far as comparison size-wise goes. And then we also have, just for comparison's sakes, here is the kind of standard version of the Maposaurus that Collecta had released not too long ago. You can see here in comparison to the Pteranodon, this is not the deluxe version, so if you have the deluxe version, just remember this is the smaller version. And then we also have, for one last comparison, actually we'll turn it this way, there is the Edaphosaurus in comparison to our Pteranodon Sternbergi, just to hopefully iron out the size and show you again roughly what the size of this figure is. So this brand new 2022 Pteranodon Sternbergi from Collecta is a very nice figure, as usual when it comes to a Collecta pterosaur. I feel like their pterosaurs are some of the best out there currently when it comes to models like this, and specifically their larger ones are some of the most visually impressive pterosaurs you will ever see. So it is nice to see Collecta every once in a while kind of transition back to a smaller version of a pterosaur and show off just how good they are at even creating the smaller type of pterosaurs, because this one is phenomenal looking, honestly, as far as both the sculpt and paint. The sculpt is super highly detailed, as you usually find when it comes to a Collecta figure, sporting some really, really nice, very fine detailing. Like the detailing in the beak is very impressive if you ask me. Nice cracks and crevices throughout. And then as you move along the body, the detailing continues to remain very vibrant and really impressive in every aspect of the sculpt. They've done a good job as far as the pose as well, because I really do like the standing positions for their pterosaurs. It's a position that allows the figure to display itself. Like, you don't have to find a way to display it. Like with the comparison you saw, the Ornithocheirus and the older Pteranodon, they're a little iffy to display at times because there's no real good way to display them unless you have some sort of like a stand or some sort of way to hold them up, whereas the standing versions, they just look great all the time. So I do like the standing position for this pterosaur and many of the others from Collecta. So the pose is also very nice. The paint job as well is very nice and flashy, but looks overall really natural if you ask me. So they've done a great job of choosing the tones of color for the figure, allowing the body to have kind of like more of like a blah type of a look, like kind of like you would expect to see on a pterosaur, with just like some grays and some whites. But then it gets really flashy and exciting when you lead up there into the beak area, the face, and then up into the crest, allowing so many different colors to shine on the pterosaur and making it just, again, look so flashy like you would expect on especially a Pteranodon Sternbergi with such a large crest. You would expect some really nice variations of colors up there, and they've done a great job of providing that for us here on this Pteranodon Sternbergi. So as a whole, this is a fantastic figure and definitely one of the most visually appealing Pteranodon figures I think I have ever seen. So when this does come into stock on Everything Dinosaur, make sure you head on over there, make sure you follow them on social media, or just keep checking their website so you can stay up to date on when they'll be stocking this figure. Hopefully it won't be too long from now, and make sure you pick this up when it does come into stock, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.